Hi, welcome to Walk Talk blah 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 blah. See, it's starting out strong. Welcome to Watch Talk Fun. My name's Joseph, and I'm really bad at playing Magic, but I'm going to tell you about a deck that I've been playing because I really enjoy it. The name of the deck is Waste Not. It used to be Waste Not Storm, but to be clear, it was Waste Not in parentheses Storm. It was never Storm. That's a lie, it kind of was, but let me go through the deck. When I started playing more competitively, I wanted to play a deck that no one else played. So obviously I picked Mono Green Stompy because no one ever plays that, right? I found that I've always played Magic and always attacked. I always wanted to smack face with a creature. That was kind of my way to win. After I kept losing, I decided, well, I need to find something new. I actually saw this deck on I Hate Card Games because oh my god, what's his name? He had a really funny video about Waste Not back when Eldrazi Winter was occurring. I saw the deck, fell in love with the deck, and I decided to build it. And what I found very quickly was Waste Not was really the best deck for me because Waste Not doesn't play with other people, it really just plays with itself. And I've always been kind of good at that, I guess, but it's way better than me playing with other people. Because when I play with other people, I lose. But when I play with myself, I usually win. So, I want to talk about the deck. To start off, the deck requires 4 copies of Waste Not. The only acceptable version of Waste Not you should ever be playing is the Commander version that doesn't have Designed by the Magic Community on the bottom in its flavor text. So Waste Not is an enchantment for 1 and a black. You want 4 copies, as I said. It has 3 abilities. 1, if an opponent discards a land card, you get 2 black. If an opponent discards a non-land, non-creature card, you draw a card. If they discard a creature card, you get a 2/2 black zombie. Pretty straightforward. Usually you're only getting one of those things unless someone discards a Dryad Arbor, in which case you get a zombie and 2 black mana, but that pretty much never happens. Waste Not costs 1 and a black, so you usually want to play it on turn 2, if you have it, or as soon as you get it usually. It's only one of the pieces of the deck that's really important, the second one being Liliana's Caress. Also an enchantment for 1 and a black. By the way, I didn't mention this beginning, the entire deck is black-red. Just to start that off, I guess, kind of late. Liliana's Caress is 1 and a black for an enchantment. It reads, whenever an opponent discards a card, they lose 2 life. So, you're gonna hurt them. You're gonna make them discard a lot of cards. And you're gonna hurt them. Back when I first started playing this deck and first put Liliana's Caress in there, I was able to kill someone on turn 3 because I was playing a bunch of cards. That let me get mana early. It was more stormish back then, but I hit them for 18 on turn 3 because I made them discard their entire hand and draw back up to 7, and they had lost more life, and I think I had bolted them or something. It was a lot of work, but I killed them on turn 3. It was pretty fun. But Liliana's Caress is basically the main kill condition. You want to get it to stick, and you want to make them draw and discard a lot. The other card that you want a 4 of, in addition to the Waste Not and the Liliana's Caress, is Burning Inquiry. Burning Inquiry is a sorcery from M10. It's for 1 red. Each player draws 3 cards and discards 3 cards at random. This card's extremely important to your strategy because the biggest problem with a discard deck is if they have no hand, they're not discarding anything. But the text on this card reads that they will draw 3 and immediately discard 3 at random. So even if you bring them down to 0 cards, they will still give you 3 discard triggers, which is extremely valuable. It can be anywhere between 6 life or 3 triggers of Waste Not, which could draw you 2 cards or get you 2 black, or any number of combination. That's only just with one of them. If you have both of them out, you are getting a stupid amount of value off of a 1 mana sorcery. Going through the deck, it has 4 copies of Lightning Bolt. That's pretty standard. That's not, I mean, it's Lightning Bolt. Do I need to explain that? It has other 1-drops. There are, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 other 1-drops. The first one I want to talk about is Raven's Crime. Raven's Crime is a sorcery. It's from Eventide, actually. It's for 1 black, target player discards a card. Pretty standard. It's not very special in that aspect. It just makes them discard a card. You know, people always just want to run falsies. Well, the reason you want to run this is because you don't really care what they're discarding, you just care that they discard. And Raven's Crime has something called Retrace. So Retrace allows you to cast the spell from your graveyard if you also discard a land while you're paying the cost, which allows you to turn a bunch of late game lands into discard spells. That's good play on turn 1. Because you're always going to be able to do it going forward. So other turn 1 plays include Shrieking Affliction. Shrieking Affliction is an enchantment for 1 black. It reads, at the beginning of each opponent's upkeep, if they have 1 or fewer cards in hand, they lose 3 life. Works pretty well with Raven's Crime. Bring them back to no cards, they start losing life pretty quick. Another card would be Bloodchief Ascension. I have 2 copies. So Bloodchief Ascension, I was toying around with this card for a little bit. I wasn't sure how good it would be, but it ended up being pretty good because it's more of a late game card. It reads, whenever an opponent, at the beginning of each end step, if an opponent lost 2 or more life this turn, put a quest counter on it, and then whenever a card is put into an opponent's graveyard from anywhere, so discarding, destroying, them playing spells, that opponent loses 2 life, or you can make target player lose 2 life and you gain 2 life, which is usually just them. Works pretty well with Liliana's Caress if you're making them discard it automatically, just add stuff on top for the quest counters. The last 1-drop is Dream Salvage. So Dream Salvage is an instant. It's a black-blue hybrid, but you'll always play for black. Instant from Shadowmoor. It reads, draw cards equal to the number of cards target opponent discarded this turn. So if you just hit them with Burning Inquiry, and you have this remaining in your hand after Burning Inquiry, and you have a black, you are drawing 3 cards, which is pretty strong. It's Ancestral Recall. Pretty good. That's pretty much all the 1-drop slots. Going into 2-drops, there are, other than Waste Not and Liliana's Caress, there's really only 1 card, and that is Collective Brutality. I was really against playing this card until I actually used it. It is 1 and a black for a sorcery with Escalate. You can escalate by discarding a card, and then it has 3 options. So every time you escalate, you get to pick another option on top of the first one. It has 3 options being target opponent reveals his or her hand and choose an insert or sorcerer from it. They discard that card. Works straight into your discard strategy. Second one is target creature gets -2/-2 until end of turn. Pretty good for creature removal. Collective Brutality is really strong against burn because of this. Third item is target opponent loses 2 life and you gain 2 life. Has some minor synergies with Bloodchief Ascension. Really not the purpose you're using it, but it can be good for extra life. So when we move up into 3-drops, you have a couple different options. I'm running 3 copies of Dark Deal. Dark Deal is a sorcery for 2 and a black. Each player discards all the cards in his or her hand and draws that many cards -1. So one of the key parts of this deck is you need to make sure that while you're having them discard, you want them to draw replacement cards. Because if they don't have cards in hand, part of your deck is not going to work the way you want it to. You want to make sure that they are drawing and replacing the things that they discarded so you can keep hurting them. Because keep in mind, Waste Not's going to be pumping you full of mana as you're forcing them to lose all the cards in their hand. And it's probably going to making you draw cards too. So you can use that to keep hurting them and making them lose life. Collective Defiance is one of the other 3-drops. So Collective Defiance is actually the card I use to kill someone on turn 3. It is 1 red. It is a sorcery. Also has Escalate, but this one costs 1 generic mana to escalate. Pick 1 or more. Target player discards all the cards in his or her hand and draws that many cards, which is usually the one you're going to use. Also, it has Collective Defiance deals 4 damage to target creature, and the last one is Collective Defiance deals 3 damage to target player, or target opponent, so they can redirect it. Generally, you're going to use the first one on them, because one of the great things about Collective Defiance is it is one-sided. So when you do that, you don't lose any of the cards in your hand, and you just gain value for what they lose if you have a Waste Not out, which is very, very powerful. The other 3-drop slots, there is 1 copies of Culligan's Command, instant, choose 2, it has an instant discard, destroy target artifact, deal 2 damage to target creature player, and then return target creature card from your graveyard to your hand. Which previously, Culligan's Command was not very helpful for that first ability, not that you really use it, because instant speed discard is pretty strong. You can get it right after they draw a card for turn. Make them discard a card. That's invaluable sometimes. There's only 1 copy of it, because the other 3-drop I have is Liliana of the Veil at 1 of. Liliana's good. I'm not going to say she's not good. She works pretty well in the deck. Problem is, you know, you don't always want to discard your own stuff. Sometimes you can get away with it. She is strong. It's more that, honestly, the most value I ever get out of her is playing her and watching the opponent sweat trying to figure out how to get rid of her and wasting resources on trying to get rid of her. That's pretty much all I use her for. I mean, obviously there's discard triggers, which are very helpful to have. Make them sack creatures, very helpful to have. It's an all-around good card. Capping out at the top end, I actually don't have any 4-drops, it seems, anywhere in this deck, even in the sideboard, but I do have 2 copies of a 5-drop, and that is 4 and 1 colorless mana for Reality Smasher. He is a 5/5 trample haste. Whenever he becomes the target of an opponent's spell, that spell is countered unless its controller discards a card. So this deck used to have literally no creatures in it at some point. But what I found was Reality Smasher is just a good card. It fits in with the discard strategy. Your things are getting countered, they're going to have to discard. They're already down on resources. He's a 5/5 trample haste. He's pretty strong. You can return with call against command. He's a 5/5 trample haste. You can play him with your Graven Karens, and he's a 5/5 trample haste. Like, I just can't get back. He's a 5/5 trample haste. That is disgusting. Going forward, though, he's really the top end. You don't always use him. You're not always terribly worried about him. He's discard fodder if you need him. So that's pretty much the main deck. If you want to go into the mana base, which is pretty aggressive, but with its color, non-basic distribution, but it's not that bad. It has 4 copies of Swamps and 5 mountains. 5 basic mountains, 4 basic swamps. Pretty low, you would normally think. It has 2 copies of Blackcleave Cliffs, which is the fast land, comes into play untapped, you have 2 or less lands. And it also has 2 copies of Blood Crypt, which is a swamp mountain, shock land, comes into play tapped unless you pay 2 life, taps for black or red. There's been a lot of argument, you know, should I play Blackcleave Cliffs or should I play Blood Crypt? What I found was, I don't want to spend the money on Blackcleave Cliffs, and Blood Crypt pretty much gets the job done. And I've also found that by having the mix, the chances of me getting a Blackcleave Cliffs when I don't get it untapped is so much lower because I don't have to rely on them as often, and I do have the Blood Crypt. That's not always the case, mind you, but sometimes it is. The other cards are 1 copy of Urborg, Tomb of Yawgmoth. Legendary land, turns everything into a swamp. It's pretty strong, especially because it can turn your mountains into mountain swamps, which is very important. But actually, its strongest trait is it turns the other land I have, which is the Graven Karens. The only ones you should ever be playing at Graven Karens is Future Sight, by the way. Graven Karens is a filter land. It comes into play untapped, taps for a colorless. If you tap it and pay a black or red, you can get a black and a red, or 2 black or 2 red mana out of it. Extremely useful for Waste Not. If you have black mana coming out of Waste Not and you have an untapped Graven Karens, you can use that to produce red to burn her face. But more importantly for Urborg turns them into swamps, which means they can activate each other, which is very valuable. Arguably the most powerful land in the deck, surprisingly, is Gyre Reach Sanitarium. Gyre Reach Sanitarium is a legendary land. It taps for a colorless, but it also has on it, tap 2, tap it, each player draws a card and discards a card. It's pretty nice to make them discard on their own turn and get more triggers off of Liliana's Caress and Waste Not, especially because it is a third of a Burning Inquiry on a stick. So you're paying more for it, but you have it as long as they don't blow up your lands. I'm running quite a few non-basics. I'm running 12 non-basic lands and 9 basics, which is normally pretty dangerous because Blood Moon's running around, but fortunately for me, I just have more mountains now, and I'm usually okay with that. It's not the greatest. It does cause some issues, I'm not gonna lie. But overall, I run mountains, so having more basic mountains is not terrible. Going into the sideboard, I have 3 copies of Surgical Extraction because I don't want to pay for a 4th. But Surgical Extraction is an extremely disgusting magic card. Instant, 1 black Phyrexian mana, so you don't have to pay mana for it, you can just pay 2 life. Choose a card in target player's, choose a target card in the opponent's graveyard, or target player's graveyard, that anything other than a basic land, and rip it out of everywhere. Rip it out of their deck, rip it out of their hand, rip it out of their graveyard, all copies. Which is very, very, very good when you discard all their stuff, especially if it's coming directly out of the deck. If they're drawing a bunch of cards and having to discard them to a Burning Inquiry or a Dark Deal or any other number of cards that make someone draw and then discard, you are getting cards that you normally wouldn't get. Because normal discard, you have to wait for them to draw their cards to actually get them into the yard. But because of the way this goes about getting them into the graveyard, it's very helpful by being able to rip out key pieces of their combo. Like if I'm playing Ad Nauseam and I get an Ad Nauseam into their graveyard, or I get Simian Spirit Guide into their graveyard, I can stop them pretty strong in that way. Any other number of decks, it's very strong at ripping out very strong cards. I also have 2 copies of Vandal Blast, so Affinity can usually be a problem. Vandal Blast seems to do pretty well though, kind of just blows up their board. That's pretty much the only reason it's in there. I have 2 copies of Fatal Push because I don't play fetch lands, so fetch lands kind of the most important part of playing Fatal Push. Since I'm not running fetch lands, it's really just good for killing Goyf. Stuff leaves, it's obviously good at killing things, but I don't really have as many permanents that leave the battlefield. If I have a zombie blocker, because I had something from Waste Not, that's usually a case where I can use Fatal Push, but I don't usually bank on it. Which is why I have 3 copies of Terminate. Kind of fills out the edges there. Allows me to get rid of things that are problems for me. Other than the 3 copies of Terminate, 2 copies of Fatal Push, I have 2 copies of Black Sun Zenith. Black Sun Zenith is a card that it's always been a pet card for me, but more particularly, it's pretty strong in a deck where you get extra mana from Waste Not. It's pretty strong because it can shuffle back in, but most importantly, I don't always need to kill all their stuff, I just need to slow it down. And putting the -1/-1 counters I found on things like Tarmogoyf, or putting them on larger creatures like Primeval Titan, or artifacts that are slightly larger than normal, like that's pretty strong. You get this ability to put -1/-1 counters on creatures, meaning the damage stays. It kills the creature or just slows it down and makes it useless. I find that to be pretty strong. I have 2 copies of Rakdos Charm, so it allows me to exile a card target player's graveyard. It's not usually used like that because I don't usually have problems with graveyard decks, which I'll explain in a second. But it also lets me destroy an artifact, so it helps me deal with Affinity. Also lets me have each creature deal 1 damage to its controller, which is really one of the best abilities for it. If I'm dealing with Affinity, I can either destroy their artifact or make them hurt themselves. The final card in the sideboard is Megrim. Megrim, also known as Bad Liliana's Caress, is 2 and a black for an enchantment. Whenever an opponent discards a card, Megrim deals 2 damage to that player. There's really only one reason that card is in my sideboard, and it's because of Ad Nauseam. If they are running Ad Nauseam off of Phyrexian Unlife, this kills them with poison when they discard the lands. Feels pretty good, not gonna lie. As far as matchups go, I mentioned, Affinity can be a problem. Jund can be a problem sometimes. It depends on your hand. Problem is, the biggest issue this deck has are with other discard decks. I've never actually played against 8-Rack. I have a feeling I'd have problems. Mostly because they're ripping away my weapons. And everyone is susceptible to discard, including discard. So that's the biggest Achilles heel for the deck. Other than that, burn. I can usually beat burn because they are losing their resources anyway. And as long as I just stop the creatures that are beating my face, they usually end up killing themselves by accident because of various, Shrieking Affliction just kills them outright at some point. I played against Boggles. Boggles is a problem if I don't have Liliana the Veil, because they usually have no hand. But unlike Burn, they do gain life. So killing them with the Shrieking Affliction is significantly harder. One of the upsides this deck has to pretty much every deck in the meta almost is, except for Ad Nauseam, is it doesn't have creatures, so creature removal is totally wasted in game 1, which is an overlooked piece of info that you usually need to keep in mind when you're going into these matches. You can be more aggressive in round 1 because they're not going to be able to stop you as they normally would because they prepare for creature decks. As I said, Jund can be a problem. It blows up my enchantments. Anything that rips out Liliana's Caress is going to give me a bad time. So there are 3 decks in the meta right now that I am so excited to play against because I'm pretty much the only deck that likes to play them because they kill themselves for me, which is what Zoicide, or what is it now? Death Shadow Zoo, or Death Shadow anything, Death Shadow X. I love playing them because they are discarding cards. And normally, that would be a problem. But I get value off of them ditching cards. So when they're discarding things such as, like Street Wraith, or they're discarding because of any other number of reasons they will discard, if I have a Dream Salvage in my hand on turn 1, and they go and they discard a bunch, I can just draw a shit ton of cards. Other than that, they might not have a hand at the end. Shrieking Affliction will kill them. I get stuff off of them losing things and discarding. Speaking of which, Cycling, which you would see mostly in Living End, same kind of deal. They are giving me free discard triggers. It is so beyond beautiful, and they give me free discard triggers. Other than that, Dredge. Free discard triggers because they're discarding because of Cathartic Reunion. Like, so invaluable to have them removing their own stuff for you to get value off of the discards. Other than that, that's pretty much the deck. It's one of my favorite decks, the only real competitive deck I have. It's actually pretty strong at times. It's meta dependent. If you have people who are running around with a lot of discard, which is not always common, you can have problems. Tron also is a very big issue most of the time. Unless I can get them to discard one of their Tron lands and rip it out with Surgical Extraction, I usually have problems with Tron. Just because they're just so... They go bigger than I do, which isn't hard. That's the deck. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments. As I said, it's one of my favorite decks of all time. And I'll see you guys next time. How bad was that?
No, that was not bad at all. That was not bad at all.